we're very pleased you're here. Thank you for turning up. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine on you and be merciful unto you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Lynn and I are very happy you're here. We're in the book of Acts, yes? Most of the time anyway. And we're now in the middle of Acts chapter 21. And I had to just kill that little fly there to get my attention back on what I'm saying. Acts chapter 21, Paul and Luke and that have come to Philip's house. Last time we were together, we said a word or two about evangelists and the different functions in the structures of the church, each congregation. So, then an Agabus, a prophet, we're told, this is Acts chapter 21, and we're now in verse 10. We stayed there many days, and a certain prophet named Agabus, he came down from Judea, and he takes Paul's belt, and he ties his own hands with it, and he said, I'm telling you this by the Holy Spirit, that the Jews will bind the man who owns this belt and deliver him into the hand of the Gentiles. This is 21:11. Now, when we heard these things, both we and those from that place pleaded with him not to go up to Jerusalem. Paul answered in 21:13, what do you mean by weeping and breaking my heart? We said a word or two about that. I made the point that more and more I read of Paul, a close reading of things about Paul, the more and more I like the man. I always thought he was too tough, a fellow that would really put you up against the wall. And we said we didn't doubt that, because when it came to the gospel, he was utterly inflexible. And that's why he wouldn't have Mark. You remember we discussed that about Mark and Barnabas. But the more you read about him, Romans chapter 16 and other places, and here, he said, you're breaking my heart, stop it. This was an emotional, sensitive man. And the bulk of what we know about him is that he was one of God's ambassadors in the war between the worlds. And if he hadn't been as strong as he was, inflexible as he was, who knows how the West would be today. For he brought the gospel into the Western world, moving west, and now we benefit it today. And it's easy nowadays for theologians and, the dabblers to critique Paul severely. But it's one thing to read a text and say a text spoken by Paul or written by him and say he's wrong. But hang around him for 3 or 4 years. See how he speaks, what he does, what he puts up with, his praying way, his hard working, his furious way of proclaiming the gospel, going to places everywhere, and all the man ever spoke was the gospel of God in Christ. The word Jesus was never out of his mouth. Now you can do what you want with Paul now because he's not there, but had you been around with him, just imagine how difficult it would have been seeing him work the miracles. Know the depth of him, how he used, all you're getting is fragments of Paul. The fundamental fragments is true. But you're not hearing, you're not getting the whole story about this guy. When he does tell a bit of his story in Philippians chapter 3, he said, I was a student of Gamaliel, who in his day was the #1 sage around. And he said, I advanced in our faith way beyond everybody else of my age. This was a profoundly educated, deeply theological man. And when he's not there, you can say, yeah, well, he was wrong. Say that when you were with him. And Jesus I know. Paul I know. But who are you? Because you've got a diploma hanging up on the wall you spent 8 years getting. Give the man a break. So, he said, you're breaking my heart. He talks in Philippians, he said, they're enemies of the cross, and I tell you that weeping. Over and over he tells them how sad he is. Read 1 Thessalonians. Most scholars say, and I would think they were right, that the book of Philippians is the warmest book he writes, but 1 Thessalonians runs very close to it. And if you read close to it and read in between the lines, the man worries greatly about all the little churches and the trouble they're having, and are they okay as your faith? All of this is a very feeling man. Yeah. And in the book of 2 Corinthians, he lists all the things that are marks of his authentic apostleship. And do you know what he lists in one of them? He said, and above everything else. Now, bear this in mind. He's not bragging. He is not bragging. He's declaring the marks. The Corinthians broke his heart. They had these fellows coming in who were claiming this, that, and the other, and they're waving around all their documents, their letters of credential, and this is how many meetings we held, and all of that. And Paul didn't have any of that kind of thing. And so there were those who were doubting his apostleship. And he will say, am I not an apostle? To the Corinthians. And he says to them in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, the marks of my authentic apostleship, this and this, the beatings, the this, that, and the other. He said, but above everything else, you know, it's my anxiety, my worry over the little churches I established. Jesus says, don't worry. Paul says, my worry is one of the marks of my authentic apostleship. So we need to not just read a text. And Jesus said not to worry, and it's all sinful to worry. Get Jesus' context, okay? Paul said, you know what the biggest marker is? I really worry about the little churches. Wake in the night, doesn't say this. I wake in the night, I can hardly sleep. When I begin to think, but what about? He said, I worry about that. And he told the Thessalonians, you know, we were ready to give you the gospel. That's what we came for. He said, but you know, we came to love you. And it's the speech of surprise. Let me ignore the grammar that he uses. He says in the grammar, you know, we weren't planning on it really, but we came to love you. And then when he hears the trouble they're having, he said, so we send this, that, and the other up to check you out. And then a couple of verses later, he can't take any more. He said, but I could bear it no longer. So he is filled with feeling. I hadn't always seen that. And so I didn't know to speak about it. I see it now. Leave the man alone. Leave him alone. Give him a break. Not that he cares now, don't you understand? He's getting a bad time today from the academy. But of course, there's nothing new about it. He got it from the churches he established. So it's no surprise, but his race has been run, he's gotten the job done, and you and I are the beneficiaries of what that man, God in that man, but God not without that man, God in that man, has done for us. And the Church of God doesn't worship Paul. No, they worship Jesus Christ. But Christ personally chose that fella and told him, I've got a job for you and it's going to hurt you bad. But Jesus to Paul, I will deliver you from the people unto whom I'll send you. He said, I'm going to send you to people, but you're going to need to be delivered from them. But I've got your back. This is a great man. And I just don't have any respect for those, especially those who profess to be professors and preachers, who openly, fervently, he's wrong, and undermine him with all of those that are impressionable. Leave him alone. Thank God for him. We're in Acts 21. He said, oh, here, stop it. You're breaking my heart. Don't go up there to Jerusalem. He said, no, I can't do that. I'm ready not only to be bound, but also to die at Jerusalem for the name of the Lord Jesus. Yeah. Eh? Oh, others were like him, you understand. There were tens of thousands of our people at various times who did that kind of thing. I'm just saying all of this and emphasizing all of this because he doesn't get the benefit of our looking at him and thinking, this was a lovely man. I mentioned to you but didn't develop it, and I won't develop it now, but Sir William Ramsay, in his book, Theological Studies and Reflections, he has a section in there called Paul, the Charming Man. Eh? You know, I'm feeling better these days. I mean, it just lifts my heart is what I mean. I'm feeling better these days that I now know Paul better. It's like, I know I'm being a little melodramatic about it, but it's like I just made a new friend. Verse 14, 24 Acts 14. So when he wouldn't be persuaded, we ceased, saying, the will of the Lord be done. Yeah. Comes a time to die. There comes a time to die. One way or another. Death's going to come knocking on our door. Unless the Lord steps in and puts an end to the whole thing before that. But we're leaving. You see all the people who today will survive the C virus? Guess what's going to happen to them? They're all going to die. All the guys that ate the food in the wilderness under Moses, you know where they all are now? Dead. You know all the people that Jesus fed, the two groups, the big multitudes that Jesus fed with the bread? They enjoyed it, and he gave it because they were hungry. You know where they are now? Dead. You know where you and I are going to be by and by? Dead. Paul says, enough. If I die, I die. That's it. And Peter will say, if you suffer according to the will of the Lord, that is, if the Lord allows it and all of that kind of thing, okay, still commit yourself to the faithful Creator. And that, you see that statement, the faithful Creator, that's the interpretive text that makes you look at everything else. Things are not going very well for me. Where is God? What God are you talking about? You're talking about the faithful God? Well, yeah. So, is he faithful under these sets of circumstances? If God is faithful, you see everything differently. I mean, if we're capable of it, sometimes we're hurting real bad, and it doesn't make any difference whether God is faithful or not, and the truth that we know He's faithful. Just in those moments, the agony and the anguish gets a hold of us and blots out other things, but we will not even then think God is faithless. And if we know He's faithful, it's okay. It's okay. Well, I don't like what will happen. I don't like that my child will be killed in a car wreck. I don't like this. And list all the possibilities. In the middle of all of that, we'll cry and we'll have anguish and we'll say, you know, why? But we will not really be asking a question. We will just be expressing our anguish, as Jesus did on the cross. Why? Why? He says. He wasn't asking for information. He was just expressing the agony he was feeling, knowing that his people were going to go down. This was the end of things, and 1.5 million of them would be slain. And then later in 123 under Bar Kokhba, more will be slain. And now they'll be going through all these years. Christ agonized. And so when he said, why? He wasn't asking for information. He wasn't doubting his Father. He wasn't forsaken by his Father. None of that is true. The man is in agony, the way he was in Luke 19 when he sat on the cross, sobbing his heart out and saying to the city, if you only knew that this is the hour God's sending me. This is the hour when God was saying to you, don't do this. He said, do you know what's going to happen? The Romans are going to come and they're going to build up embankments against you. And Paul says, I'm going to die one of these days. Don't stop me. My life, I love it. Tough times and all, I love it. But I don't love it that much that I'm not willing to go and do what I think I should do, knowing that I'm going to die there. Well, you know, if that's what happens, it happens. And so the group took a look at him and said, no point arguing any longer with him. So, okay, we all packed up, went to Jerusalem. Disciples from Caesarea went with us up, and on he goes. When he comes to Jerusalem, the brethren received us gladly. On the following day, Paul went with us to James, and all the elders were present. All the big hitters are there, all the good men and the good women. They're all there. All the elders were present in this particular meeting. When he had greeted them, this is 21:19, when he had greeted them, he told them in detail the things that God had done among the Gentiles through his ministry. He said, I preached to the Gentiles, and God found glory for himself and glory for all those people. And when they heard it, this is all these Jews in the mother church, Jerusalem, where all Jews looked, no matter where they lived in the diaspora, they all looked toward Jerusalem and would turn up at times for the Pentecost, they would turn up for the Passover, they would turn up for all of those big feasts, they would all turn up. Here in the mother church, when they heard it, 21:20, they glorified the Lord, and they said to him, they glorified the Lord, we're pleased that Gentiles are saved. Can't tell you how much. It's wonderful what God has done through you. Want to tell you this. However, there's no however in the text, but it's in the text. They said, you see, brother, how many myriads of Jews, thousands and thousands of them. We get the impression that Jesus was rejected and Jews didn't want him. That's not true. You only have to read, as we've read through the book of Acts, thousands turned to him. They didn't understand all that we know, and some of them understood a whole lot more than we now know. But in their thousands, they turned to him. They believed that Jesus indeed was and is the Messiah, but more than the Messiah, the Lord of all, Peter will insist. And they said, you see how many thousands there are that believe, and they're all zealous for the law. They're not saying that Jesus Christ is, they're not denying that Jesus is the fulfillment of the law. They're Jews, for pity's sake. They live in Jerusalem. This is their heritage. They keep the feasts. They do these things. They offer sacrifices. They say thank you and all of that. They hold on to all the customs that make them Jews. They didn't become Gentiles because they became Christians. They're Jews, like turning Americans into Chinese. No insults intended to anybody. Turning Americans into Chinese overnight. That doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. The Brits can't turn the Irish into English. You know what I mean. People live their lives and they're shaped that way. And these people who have now found Jesus to be the Messiah, they now know He's alive, but He didn't leave saying, tell everybody they're not to do any more Jewish stuff. Nothing like that. And they said, they have heard 21. But they have been informed about you that you teach all the Jews who are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses. Saying that they ought not to circumcise their children and to walk after the customs. What then? The assembly must certainly meet, for they will hear that you have come. Therefore, do what we tell you. We have 4 men who have taken a vow. Take them and be purified with them, and pay their expenses. You know, the sacrificial and buying the animal and all of that kind of thing. That all may know that those things of which they were informed concerning you are nothing. But that you yourself also walk orderly and keep the law. You're a Jew. You're not a renegade Jew. You're not undermining Moses and all the truth and all the signs and the markers. The Passover was this and it spoke of this. All of that stuff. He hurried, we read earlier. He wanted to get there by Pentecost. This was a Jew. And he will say in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, I'm a slave to nobody, and yet I've made myself a slave to everybody. To the Gentiles, I'm a Gentile. To a Jew, I'm a Jew. And that's what they told him, and sure enough, he said he would be glad to do it. 25. But concerning the Gentiles who believe, we have written and decided that they should observe no such thing, all of these things that the Jews do. He said these Gentiles don't have to do the Jewish things. We're Jews for pity's sake. But they don't have to do it because they're not Jews. But they had the gospel, as these Jews had the gospel. They knew the difference between the gospel and all these customs and that kind of thing. He said, they don't have to do it. We've written them and told them, have nothing to do with idols. And from blood, you know, and drinking blood and things strangled, from sexual immorality. And we're asking them to do it in part, mark you, in part, so that they will not be a needless offense to the Jews. And Paul writes to the Corinthians and says, whatever you do, don't be creating offense to the Jews or to the church. Stop it. Whatever you do, when you see what is required around you, not to be offensive so that you might live out the gospel of Christ and be able to speak the gospel of Christ, take care of that. So Paul took them in 26, Acts 21:26, purified them, entered the temple to announce the expiration of the days of purification, at which time an offering should be made for each one of them. Now when the 7 days were almost ended, the Jews Asia, seeing him in the temple, stirred up the whole crowd and laid hands on him, crying out, men of Israel, help. I want to butt in at that point, okay? Paul offers sacrifices up. He pays for the sacrifices. He goes through the cleansing ritual and all of that. That's Jewish stuff, for pity's sake. We thought the law was all done and you weren't allowed to do that anymore. No. Let me tell you the background to this. It's Matthew 23. No, not the background to it. A section that tells you what is happening here in 21. It's Matthew 13. Matthew 13, that's the beginning of the New Testament, isn't it? Well, I think I can make that. Matthew 13. Christ telling parables. And he's telling parables about, and if I can find the verse very quickly, yes, got it. Oh. Nina just gave me the word. 5 minutes or she's going to cut my throat. But she wouldn't. She would choke me, but she wouldn't cut my throat. 13:24 of Matthew. You put another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. Matthew 13:25. But while man slept, his enemy came and sowed tares, weeds. We're going to say weeds from here on in, unless I can't help saying tares, okay? He came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went his way. But 26, when the grain had sprouted and produced a crop, then the weeds also appeared. There's all the wheat, let's say, growing. And this lunatic had come because he's an enemy, and he sowed seed down with the seed where the wheat were growing, yes? So when the weed came up, the weeds were feeding on the same soil. They were growing up all entangled with the wheat. So there they were. So the guys come out to look at the fields. And the servants, 27, the servants of this good man, the servants of the owner came and said to him, Sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then it has weeds? He said to them, An enemy has done this. The servant said to him, Do you want us then to go up and gather them up? You want us to rip all these weeds up? Here these things are growing. Look. See this. Here's this big field. Let's say there's lovely wheat there, and right by it, tangled all up with them, are the weeds. And the guys say to the owner, we see these weeds. Listen, this is very important. We're going to quit in a minute and then we're going to take it up, God helping us next time, okay? But we need to get this in your head. I need to get it in my head. So you write me and tell me, remember this, and I'll be happy with that. They did not mistake weeds for wheat. It wasn't that they were ignorant. No, which is which? They knew exactly what it was. That is wheat. That is weeds. Whatever you do with this parable, you are not to think, I am not to think. They didn't really know the difference between them. They knew the difference between them. Okay? So they said to the master in the passage we just read, you want us to go and tear up these weeds? And he said, no, I don't want you to do that because you might make a mistake between the wheat and the weeds. Is that what he said? That's not what he said. He said, no, I don't want you to do that. Once more, I know it's a bit tedious, but this is critically important about this and how it affects 21 and how it affects church discipline today. They said, there's wheat, there's weeds. You want us to go and rip up the weeds? He says, no, I don't want you to. In 28, he tells the enemy did it. And they say, do you want us to tear them up? He says in 29, no, I don't want you to tear the weeds up. Lest, just in case, you gather up the tares, in gathering up the tares, you also uproot the wheat. Not mistake. I know you won't make a mistake. I know you know the difference between the wheat and the tares. But I don't want you to tear up the weeds, because in doing that, you may also tear up wheat. These things are all tangled up and connected. They're all rooted together, feeding in the same soil. And to destroy one may, at this moment, the harvest will come, and we'll talk about that, and I'm done right now. And Linda and I are very pleased you're with us. Come back if you can, will you?